The Abundance Loop. How Small Wins Create Unlimited Growth. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. There's a moment in every journey when the first step feels heavier than it should. The mountain looms. The dream feels too distant, too fragile. Most people stand at that starting line and wait, for motivation, for a sign, for certainty that they'll make it. But those who live lives of unstoppable growth know a different secret. The wheel of abundance doesn't start spinning because you believe you can. It starts spinning because you move. Small actions, invisible at first, are what shift the weight to a single decision. A tiny commitment, a whisper of effort. They don't seem world-changing. They don't look powerful. Yet they are the spark that ignites a loop capable of transforming everything. As Les Brown once said, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Inside that simple truth lies the foundation of the abundance loop. Small wins build momentum, momentum builds confidence, and confidence builds transformation. This is not a book about radical overhauls or overnight successes. It's a book about the magic hidden in daily movements, the micro actions that seem almost too small to matter, yet over time create a life so rich, so full, that it feels almost effortless. It's about understanding that growth is not a single event but a living process, a rhythm of becoming rather than arriving. Throughout these pages, you'll discover how to create unstoppable momentum by celebrating small victories, stacking wins, and building an identity rooted in consistent action. You'll meet people just like you who learned to stop waiting for the perfect time, and instead created extraordinary lives through humble beginnings. You are closer than you think. The energy you seek, the life you dream about, is already within reach. All it takes is one push, one tiny win, one quiet decision to move forward today. Chapter 1. The First Push. Starting where you are. Eli stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop, the weight of everything he hadn't done pressing against his chest. Around him, half-read books, abandoned journals, and unopened fitness apps cluttered the space. Silent reminders of every plan he had ever made and never finished. It wasn't that he lacked ambition. It was that he had come to believe starting required a grand gesture, a perfect day, a tidal wave of motivation, a sign from the universe that today was finally different. And so, days became weeks, and weeks became years, and the wheel stayed still. He wasn't alone. Most people live suspended in the same invisible trap, waiting for inspiration to strike, for circumstances to align, for some mythological feeling called readiness. But what they don't realize is that waiting is not neutral, it's corrosive. Every day spent hesitating erodes a little more belief in one's own ability to change. Momentum, it turns out, isn't found in planning the perfect launch. It's built in the scrappy, imperfect, often clumsy first push. That push doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be powerful. It just has to happen. Eli learned this one gray Tuesday morning when, overwhelmed and desperate, he decided to take the smallest possible step toward health. He filled a glass of water. That was it. No meal plan. No new gym membership, just hydration. But that tiny action, laughably simple, did something profound. It reminded him that he wasn't powerless. He could move, even if the movement was small, and small was enough to break the spell. There is magic hidden inside action, even the smallest kind. Neuroscience shows that taking any step, however minor, triggers a shift in the brain's chemistry. Motion signals agency. It reduces feelings of helplessness and builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that your choices matter. Once you feel that spark, even faintly, the whole terrain changes. You stop looking at the mountain ahead and start focusing on the ground right under your feet. The mistake people make is thinking their first move must be epic. They wait to write the entire book when they could have written a single messy paragraph. They wait to run 5 miles when they could have simply laced up their shoes. But the abundance loop doesn't care about the size of your push, it only cares that the wheel starts to move. Once it does, momentum is no longer theoretical, it's physical, real, something you can feel pulling you forward. Eli didn't transform overnight. But after the glass of water came a 10-minute walk. After the walk came better sleep. After better sleep came clearer thinking. Each step was so small, it was almost invisible. Until one day he looked up and realized he was living inside a body, and a life he hardly recognized. The wheel, once immobile, now spun with ease, gathering energy, pulling him toward opportunities he couldn't have imagined back when he was waiting to be ready. Starting where you are isn't just a suggestion, it's the only doorway to real change. Perfect conditions are a fantasy, real progress is messy, small, and beautifully human. That first push doesn't need a master plan or fearless bravery. It simply needs a choice, a tiny, imperfect move that whispers, "I can begin." And once you begin, everything around you starts to shift. What once felt impossible loses its weight. The abundance loop stirs to life. In the next chapter, you'll discover how even your smallest wins don't just lift your spirit, they rewire your mind for unstoppable momentum. Chapter 2. Tiny but Mighty, the Art of Micro-Actions. If you stood at the bottom of a mountain and looked straight up, you might feel your stomach twist. The summit would seem impossibly far. Your mind would start whispering doubts before your feet ever moved. But what if, instead, you focused only on the first step? Not the peak, not the 1,000 steps between, just one. You would find that you could always take one step, even if the whole climb felt overwhelming. And once you took that step, the next one wouldn't feel as terrifying. Most people never start because the mountain intimidates them into paralysis. They think change must be grand, dramatic, a spectacle worth broadcasting. But the truth, the liberating truth, is that every meaningful transformation in history, from revolutions to personal renaissances, started with something so small it almost seemed insignificant at the time. The art of micro-actions is about embracing this paradox, that tiny moves, executed consistently, are far more powerful than grand intentions left unrealized. Consider Anna, who dreamed for years of writing a novel but was swallowed by the scope of it. Every time she sat down, the weight of the task crushed her. A whole novel? Hundreds of pages? It felt laughably out of reach. So she quit before she truly began. Then one day, desperate for a different approach, she made a decision. She wouldn't write a novel. She wouldn't even write a chapter. She would write one sentence a day. That's it. One line, scribbled on a sticky note if necessary. Some days, it was all she managed. But other days the single sentence became 2, then 5, then a page. Over a year, those scraps became chapters. And eventually, a completed manuscript sat in her hands, the result not of massive effort but of minuscule, stubborn action. Science supports what Anna stumbled upon. Researchers in habit formation have found that tiny behaviors, what they call atomic habits, are the true building blocks of lasting change. When an action is so small that it feels almost ridiculously easy, resistance vanishes. You don't have to summon massive willpower to drink one glass of water, to open your notebook, to stretch for 2 minutes. And yet, each micro-action feeds a loop of success. Action generates progress. Progress generates motivation, and motivation fuels more action. The brilliance of micro-actions lies in their stealth. Because they are so manageable, they slip past your brain's defense mechanisms, the fear, the overwhelm, the self-sabotage. They sneak change into your life without announcing their arrival. And by the time you notice, you're already moving, already evolving, already gathering momentum. There's a hidden power in lowering the bar. By redefining success as something achievable every day, you create a rhythm of winning. And winning, no matter how small, triggers dopamine releases in the brain, reinforcing the behavior and making it easier to repeat. Momentum doesn't erupt from heroic effort. It rises from repeated victories stacked like bricks until they form a fortress of new identity. Imagine waking up tomorrow and choosing just one micro-action in the area you most want to grow. Not get fit, but do 5 squats. Not master finances, but open the budgeting app. Not fix my relationship, but send a kind text. One step, deliberately tiny. One push, intentionally light, and then another, and another, until the wheel hums with its own beautiful, self-sustaining force. In the next chapter, you'll discover how these small victories do more than build habits. They actually rewire your brain chemistry, setting you up for unstoppable momentum. Chapter 3. The Dopamine Effect. How Success Rewires Your Brain. When Mia crossed the finish line of her first 5K, she wasn't thinking about the science behind her surge of joy. She was too busy grinning through tears, high-fiving strangers, and marveling at how far she had come from the woman who once couldn't jog a single block. But inside her brain, a miracle was unfolding, a cascade of chemicals reinforcing every step she had taken to get there. Chief among them was dopamine, the neurotransmitter often called the reward chemical, and it was working overtime to etch that moment into her memory. Most people misunderstand dopamine. They think it's about pleasure, about fleeting bursts of happiness. But in truth, dopamine's real magic lies in motivation and learning. It's the brain's way of marking experiences that should be repeated. Every time you complete a task, no matter how small, your brain drips dopamine into your system, creating a feeling of satisfaction and a subconscious note that says, "Do this again." This biological loop is the engine behind momentum. Success, even tiny success, literally rewires your brain to seek more of it. The abundance loop is not just a metaphor, it's a biological reality. When you complete a micro-action, whether it's a 2-minute stretch, a single line in your journal, or a glass of water, you're not just checking a box. You're building a neural pathway, strengthening the connection between action and reward. And the more often you activate that pathway, the easier it becomes to travel. What was once an overgrown trail becomes a paved road, and eventually, a superhighway. But the opposite is also true. When victories are too rare, when goals are too grand or too distant, the brain doesn't release enough dopamine to sustain motivation. That's why so many people start with fire and fizzle out by week 3. They're starving their brains of the chemical fuel needed to maintain forward motion. Grand ambitions feel noble, but without daily rewards, they become graveyards of forgotten dreams. This is why micro-actions matter so profoundly. Each tiny win acts like a spark plug, firing a tiny burst of motivation that makes the next action more likely. It's why Mia's decision months earlier to walk 1 block, then 2, then jog for 30 seconds was so powerful. Each small victory wasn't just a physical accomplishment, it was a chemical investment, layering motivation upon motivation until finishing a 5K felt inevitable rather than impossible. You don't have to run races to trigger this process. Dopamine isn't picky. It responds to any completed task you care about. Make your bed. Send a thank you email. Cross off one item from a daunting to-do list. Each completed action is a vote for your new identity, a chemical signature that says, "This is who I am now." Success doesn't change you all at once, it rewires you one tiny win at a time. Understanding the dopamine effect transforms how you approach growth. Instead of chasing some distant finish line, you begin to look for small wins you can rack up today, knowing each one is shaping your future self in ways you can't yet see. You realize that feeling good about progress isn't self-indulgence, it's neuroscience, it's a strategy. Mia's smile at the finish line was the visible evidence of an invisible transformation. She had become someone who moved, someone who tried, someone who finished. Her brain, once wired for avoidance and fear, now pulsed with circuits of action and resilience. The loop had spun so many times that it had become her nature. In the next chapter, you'll see how celebrating these small victories, not just achieving them, turbocharges the abundance loop even further. Chapter 4. Celebration as Strategy. Why Small Wins Deserve Big Cheers. When Daniel finished his first full week of sticking to his morning routine, he didn't tell anyone. It seemed too small, too insignificant to matter. He thought real accomplishments were reserved for big milestones, promotions, degrees, and life-altering announcements. So he moved on, quietly checking the box, barely pausing to notice what he had achieved. And without realizing it, he robbed himself of the very fuel he needed to keep going. Most of us have been trained to dismiss small victories, to see them as unworthy of recognition. We are taught to celebrate only the peaks, not the steps, but human brains are wired differently. Progress, no matter how minor, triggers an emotional response. When acknowledged, that response releases a surge of positive reinforcement, strengthening the neural pathways that led to success. When ignored, the brain receives no reward, no encouragement to repeat the behavior. Over time, motivation dries up, and the loop slows to a crawl. Celebration isn't frivolous, it's a strategic tool for momentum. It tells your brain, this matters, we do it again. It's how toddlers learn to walk, fueled by the wild applause of their parents for every wobbly step. It's how elite athletes maintain grueling training schedules, celebrating each small improvement with deliberate rituals. It's how humans, across cultures and centuries, have anchored achievement to emotion, ensuring that success, no matter how small, becomes sticky. Daniel learned this the hard way. After a few more weeks of dutifully following his morning routine without any real emotional acknowledgement, he started skipping days. The motivation that had once felt fresh became stale. It wasn't that the routine stopped working. It was that his brain no longer felt rewarded by it. Only when a friend suggested he celebrate his streak, perhaps with a simple fist pump, a happy dance, or a word of genuine self-praise, did things shift. At first it felt silly, forced, but over time it rewired his experience. Each small celebration lit up his brain like a victory parade, making the behavior feel worthwhile, even joyful. You don't need balloons or confetti to celebrate effectively. You only need intentionality. It could be a whispered yes after sending a difficult email, a quick moment of gratitude after finishing a workout, a written tally of days you showed up for yourself. The method doesn't matter nearly as much as the message. I did something good, and it deserves acknowledgement. Celebrating small wins also inoculates you against the slow poison of self-criticism. Too often, people notice only their shortcomings, their missed marks, their imperfections. This selective attention strengthens a narrative of failure, making it harder to persist. But when you train yourself to spot wins, no matter how small, you tilt your inner dialogue toward empowerment. You become someone who notices success, who expects it, who multiplies it. Over time, these celebrations become woven into your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone struggling to change, you see yourself as someone who wins daily. Someone who moves forward, who chooses growth, who honors effort, and that identity, once rooted, becomes self-perpetuating. The abundance loop spins faster not just because you act, but because you feel good about acting. Positive emotion becomes the magnetic field that draws you onward. Daniel, now months into his journey, laughs at how embarrassed he once felt about celebrating a week of success. Today he celebrates everything. Every early morning, every glass of water, every decision to move instead of stagnate, and his life reflects it. A momentum so strong it feels effortless, inevitable, natural. In the next chapter, you'll discover how these stacked wins, fueled by micro-actions and joyful reinforcement, create a confidence so solid it becomes your new foundation. Chapter 5. The Confidence Compound. Belief builds belief. Jasmine didn't wake up one morning radiating self-confidence. In fact, for most of her life, confidence had felt like a country she wasn't allowed to visit. She thought it was something you either had or didn't, a personality trait stamped at birth. But what she eventually discovered is that confidence isn't bestowed. It's built quietly and steadily, like a structure rising from a solid foundation of small victories. It started with a promise she made to herself, one so modest it almost felt silly. She decided she would walk around her block every morning for a week. No pressure to run or track her pace. No Instagram-worthy photos, just a simple loop, rain or shine. The first morning was awkward. She felt foolish tying her sneakers for something so insignificant. But she did it. And when she returned home, damp from the misty air, she noticed something almost electric humming under her skin. It wasn't pride exactly. It was proof. She had said she would do something, and she had done it. That first win unlocked something primal. The next morning, she walked again, and the next, and the next. Each lap around the block wasn't just a physical loop, it was a message, a declaration. I am the kind of person who keeps promises to myself. With each repetition, Jasmine's confidence grew not because she became invincible, but because she accumulated evidence that she could trust herself. And that self-trust, once fragile, became unshakable. This is the hidden architecture of real confidence. It's not forged in moments of grandstanding or public acclaim. It's built in private, in the quiet spaces where you make a choice, and then honor it. Each small win is a brick laid carefully atop the last. Each micro-success strengthens the foundation. Over time, you create a structure capable of withstanding storms. Research in psychology supports this phenomenon. Confidence isn't an emotion that floats in on a good day, it's the result of actions that reinforce a sense of agency. When you act and succeed, even in small ways, you send a signal to your brain that you are capable. That capability becomes your default setting, your automatic belief. The world doesn't have to validate you. You validate yourself through movement, through action, through the compounding of deliberate wins. But the compound effect cuts both ways. Every time you break a promise to yourself, every time you set a goal and abandon it without acknowledgement, you chip away at your internal trust. Doubt seeps in, hesitation metastasizes. The wheel that could be spinning toward abundance instead rusts from disuse. That's why micro-actions are so critical. They are small enough to succeed consistently, building a fortress of belief one brick at a time. Jasmine didn't stop at her morning walks. As her belief grew, so did her ambition. She began signing up for workshops she once felt unworthy of attending. She applied for a job she thought was out of reach, and got it. She rebuilt a strained relationship with her sister, beginning with a single, awkward text message. None of these changes happened overnight. They were the natural outgrowth of a confidence that had been steadily, methodically compounded through hundreds of small wins. When people look at confident individuals, they often mistake the visible surface for the hidden foundation. They see the poise but not the process. They don't realize the true story, 1,000 tiny moments of action and belief, stacked quietly, until self-trust became an unstoppable force. In the next chapter you'll discover how these wins, once stacked, don't just stay isolated, they begin to bleed into every area of your life, multiplying far beyond what you initially imagined. Chapter 6: Stacking Success. How Wins Multiply Across Life. When Victor committed to drinking a glass of water first thing every morning, he didn't expect it to change anything beyond his hydration. It was a simple micro-action, a pebble tossed into the vast pond of his life. But what he didn't realize then was that small changes never stay small. Like ripples spreading outward, they touch everything. After a few weeks, Victor noticed he was waking up earlier. Not because he set an alarm, but because his body felt fresher, less sluggish. With the extra time, he began stretching for a few minutes before his shower. That small stretch made him feel just a little more energized, which led to choosing healthier breakfasts. The better nutrition made him more focused at work. The boost in performance earned him praise from his boss, which emboldened him to speak up more during meetings. That growing confidence spilled into his personal life, strengthening friendships he had neglected. What started as one glass of water became a cascade of victories, stacking higher and higher, until the shape of his life began to change. Success is never siloed. Wins in one area leak into others, often in ways you can't predict at the beginning. Psychologists call it positive spillover, the phenomenon where improvements in one domain naturally enhance performance and satisfaction in unrelated domains. Exercise doesn't just strengthen muscles, it strengthens discipline, sharpens thinking, and boosts mood. Learning a new skill doesn't just expand your knowledge, it rewires your brain for resilience and creativity. One push starts a chain reaction. The abundance loop thrives on these connections. It doesn't operate like a set of isolated gears. It moves like a living organism, each success feeding energy into the next. Every small action builds competence, every act of competence builds confidence, and every surge of confidence emboldens you to attempt something slightly bigger. Over time, the victories stack, forming a tower sturdy enough to support dreams you once thought too heavy to lift. Victor's experience wasn't unusual. Many people underestimate the reach of small wins because they measure change too narrowly. They expect linear progress, drink water, stay hydrated, end of story, but growth rarely moves in straight lines. It spirals outward, touching relationships, careers, mental health, finances, creativity, and beyond. That's the secret. That's the magic hidden in mundane beginnings. The key is to stay in motion long enough for the compounding effect to kick in. The early stages often feel slow, almost laughably insignificant. It's easy to overlook them because the human mind craves instant, dramatic results. But compounding isn't about spectacle, it's about persistence. It rewards those willing to trust the unseen progress, to keep stacking small win after small win until the cumulative weight becomes undeniable. Imagine standing at the base of a giant snowball perched at the top of a hill. One small push wouldn't seem like much at first, but given time, gravity, and momentum, that snowball would gather mass and speed until it became a force of nature, impossible to stop. That's what stacking success feels like from the inside. At first, it's effortful. Later, it's effortless. Victor often laughs when he tells his story now. If someone had told him at the beginning that a glass of water would lead to a promotion, stronger friendships, and a body he was proud of, he would have rolled his eyes. But looking back, he sees the truth clearly. Growth doesn't demand radical overhauls. It demands faithfulness to the tiny steps that build invisible bridges to extraordinary outcomes. In the next chapter, you'll discover the deeper science behind why small wins matter so much and how momentum, once started, can shift from fragile to ferocious. Chapter 7. The Science of Momentum, Why Small Wins Matter. On a cold winter morning, a physics teacher placed a heavy wooden block on a smooth table. He tied a string to the block and gently tugged. Nothing happened. He pulled a little harder. Still nothing. But then, with a sudden, almost imperceptible shift, the block jerked forward. Once moving, it glided across the table with far less effort than it took to get it started. His students leaned forward, watching with wide eyes. That, he said, is inertia at work. It's harder to start than to keep moving. The human spirit obeys the same law. Getting started often feels monumental. Staying in motion, once you've begun, becomes surprisingly easier. Small wins matter because they create the initial break in inertia, the stubborn stuckness that keeps dreams locked away in the realm of someday. The first push requires the most energy. But once the loop of action and reward is activated, momentum takes over, carrying you farther than sheer willpower ever could. Momentum, in scientific terms, is mass multiplied by velocity. In life, your mass is your commitment, the depth of your decision to move. Your velocity is the speed at which you take consistent actions. You don't need a massive push if you have enough steady, repeated movement. That's the beauty of micro-actions. They build both mass and velocity in manageable increments, stacking energy until momentum begins to work for you instead of against you. There's a hidden psychological layer to this as well. Early wins shift your internal narrative. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who struggles to start, you begin to identify as someone who takes action. That identity shift accelerates behavior change. When you believe you are a person who follows through, your brain seeks to prove it true with every choice. Small wins are not just progress markers, they are identity builders, stacking proof that you are becoming the person you aspire to be. Consider Leah, who longed to run a half marathon but hadn't exercised in years. The thought of training felt overwhelming, so she focused only on running for 1 minute. Just 60 seconds. At first it seemed too trivial to matter, but that 1 minute built a bridge to 2 minutes, then 5, then a mile. Each small success wasn't just a physical achievement, it was a mental reprogramming. She stopped telling herself, "I can't do this," and started believing, "I'm the kind of person who runs." Her momentum became self-reinforcing. This feedback loop of action, success, and identity explains why small wins are so potent. It's not about the size of the step. It's about the confirmation each step provides. The more evidence you gather, the faster momentum builds. The faster it builds, the less you have to fight for every inch of progress. Movement begets movement. Success begets success. But momentum can't be hoarded. It must be fed. The loop thrives on regular input, consistent small actions that keep the wheel spinning. When you stop feeding it, friction sets in, inertia returns. That's why sustainable growth doesn't come from occasional sprints of motivation, but from the daily discipline of micro-actions. A tiny act of courage, a minute of focus, a single glass of water, each one matters because each one keeps the loop alive. Leah didn't become a marathon runner because she suddenly found unlimited willpower. She became one because she respected the physics of her own momentum. She honored the small steps, trusted the slow build, and allowed the loop to carry her beyond where she ever thought she could go. In the next chapter, you'll learn how choosing the right arena to focus your momentum can amplify your growth even faster, directing your energy where it matters most. Chapter 8. Choosing Your Arena. Health, Wealth, Love, Purpose. When Sophia first learned about the abundance loop, she wanted to apply it to everything at once. She scribbled a dozen goals onto a whiteboard: lose weight, double her income, deepen her friendships, launch a side business, volunteer more. Her enthusiasm was real, but within weeks, she found herself overwhelmed and stalled. Progress flickered in too many directions to gain any real traction. Her mistake wasn't in wanting more, it was in trying to spin too many wheels at the same time without enough force to move any of them meaningfully. The truth is, while small wins create momentum, that momentum still needs focus. Energy dispersed too widely evaporates. Energy concentrated gains power. Choosing one primary arena at a time allows the abundance loop to build strength, speed, and resilience in a focused direction, creating a foundation stable enough to support expansion into other areas later. Growth multiplies, but only after it gains critical mass in one place first. Sophia's coach asked her a question that changed everything. Where, right now, would a breakthrough change your life the most? She paused. After some reflection, she realized that while wealth and relationships mattered, her health was the battlefield where a win would transform everything. If she had more energy, more strength, more confidence, every other goal would become easier. So she chose. She picked health, even though it meant setting aside other worthy ambitions for a season. That choice, though difficult, unlocked a level of progress she hadn't thought possible. Choosing your arena doesn't mean giving up on other dreams. It means understanding that momentum feeds expansion. Win first in one area, and you earn the right to expand your efforts. Early victories create belief, discipline, and capacity that transfer naturally into new domains. You don't have to fix your whole life at once, you just have to build unstoppable motion in one place. The process of choosing isn't complicated, but it requires honesty. Ask yourself, where do I feel the most stuck? Where would progress make the biggest emotional impact? Where would winning reignite my hope and restore my energy? Often the area where you feel the most shame, frustration, or longing is the very place the loop is waiting to awaken. Start there, not because it's easy, but because it's meaningful. There's also wisdom in considering leverage. Some arenas naturally spill over into others more easily. Health boosts focus and emotional resilience. Financial stability reduces stress and opens opportunities. Strong relationships create support systems that amplify growth in all directions. Purpose clarifies priorities and fuels persistence. Choose strategically, knowing that the right first win can create domino effects beyond your initial vision. Sophia's choice to focus on health didn't mean she ignored her career or relationships. It meant that every day, her primary micro-actions aligned with energy, strength, and self-care. Over time, as her health improved, she noticed she had more confidence in meetings. She found herself more patient with friends. She even had the stamina to revisit side business ideas that once seemed impossible to pursue. By anchoring her momentum in one arena, she inadvertently elevated her entire life. The temptation to scatter your focus will always be there. Modern life encourages multitasking, glorifies busyness, and seduces you into believing you can do everything at once if you just try hard enough. But mastery requires concentration. Growth demands focus. The abundance loop spins fastest when fed by deliberate, concentrated force. Sophia's life today is unrecognizable compared to where she started. Not because she tackled everything simultaneously, but because she honored the simple power of choosing. Her wheel, once stuck, now spins so fast it pulls dreams toward her almost effortlessly. In the next chapter, you'll discover how tracking your triumphs, no matter how small, builds visible proof that fuels unstoppable belief. Chapter 9. Tracking Triumphs, Building Proof of Progress. Evan sat slumped at his kitchen table, staring at his journal. He had been working hard for weeks, waking early, eating better, reaching out to old friends, but somehow, it didn't feel like he was making any real progress. The problem wasn't that he wasn't changing, the problem was that he couldn't see it. Progress without proof often feels like standing still, no matter how far you've actually traveled. The human brain is notoriously bad at recognizing gradual improvement. We are wired to spot problems, dangers, and deficiencies more quickly than wins. It's a survival instinct, but it makes personal growth hard to feel in the moment. Without tangible markers, the mind defaults to discouragement. That's why tracking your triumphs is not a nice to have, it's essential. It transforms invisible momentum into visible proof, proof that your actions are building something real and lasting. Evan's breakthrough came when he found an old notebook tucked into a drawer. Flipping through the pages, he saw goal lists from months ago, dreams that, at the time, felt distant and fragile. But reading through them now, he realized something stunning. Many of the things he had once only hoped for were now part of his everyday life. Healthier habits, stronger friendships, more confidence. It hadn't happened all at once, but it had happened. He just hadn't been tracking closely enough to notice the transformation as it unfolded. Tracking small wins shifts your focus. Instead of obsessing over how far you still have to go, you start celebrating how far you've already come. Each recorded success, no matter how minor, becomes a data point in the story of your growth. Over time, those points connect into a map, a clear, undeniable record that you are moving forward. This visual evidence fuels belief, and belief fuels persistence. When you can see progress, you are far more likely to continue. The method of tracking doesn't have to be complicated. It could be a simple notebook where you list one win per day. It could be a habit tracking app that celebrates streaks with colorful badges. It could be a jar where you drop a marble for every action taken toward your goal. What matters is consistency. The act of recording turns ephemeral experiences into concrete proof. Tracking also reprograms your attention. Instead of scanning your life for failures, your brain begins to hunt for victories. This rewiring strengthens the abundance loop, because what you focus on expands. The more you notice success, the more success you create. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, powered by deliberate attention. When Evan started writing down one small win every evening, something subtle but powerful shifted. At first it was hard to think of anything worth mentioning. Some days all he could muster was to drink enough water or send a kind text. But over time, the entries grew. Asked for a raise at work, finished a 2-mile run, repaired a strained friendship. His journal became a mirror, reflecting a man he was proud to recognize. Without tracking, these milestones would have faded into the blur of daily life. With tracking, they stood tall, monuments to effort, resilience, and momentum. Each entry said, in bold letters, "You are doing it. You are becoming." That tangible proof fed his drive, kept the wheel spinning, and pulled him through inevitable moments of doubt and fatigue. Momentum isn't just about movement. It's about recognition. It's about teaching your heart and mind to see what is often invisible. Tracking turns whispers of progress into shouts of triumph. It transforms fleeting feelings into lasting certainty. In the next chapter, you'll discover how to use small wins, not just to build momentum, but to bounce back stronger than ever when setbacks threaten to knock you off course. Chapter 10. Bouncing back. Using small wins to recover from setbacks. When Marcus twisted his ankle 2 weeks before his first 10K race, it felt like the world had cracked open beneath him. He had trained for months, built momentum with relentless small wins, and now everything seemed to crumble overnight. He sat on his couch, ankle wrapped in ice, a deep ache forming not just in his leg but in his spirit. The temptation to give up entirely washed over him in waves. What was the point, he thought, if a single misstep could undo everything? Setbacks have a way of whispering dangerous lies. They say the progress never mattered. They suggest the momentum was fragile, the growth an illusion. They try to convince you that falling down means starting over from zero. But none of that is true. The real secret to resilience is understanding that momentum is never erased by a fall, it's reignited by a return. And the return, like everything else in the abundance loop, begins small. Marcus could have surrendered to the setback. Instead, he decided to find a new starting point. He couldn't run, but he could stretch gently. He couldn't train for distance, but he could work on upper body strength. His victories no longer looked like crossed finish lines, they looked like completed rehab exercises, minutes logged on a stationary bike, moments of choosing hope over despair. Each small win was a vote against the voice of defeat, a reminder that movement, any movement, was still possible. Small wins are powerful precisely because they are accessible, even when everything else feels impossible. They are the life rafts that keep you afloat when the storm hits. When you can't sprint, you can still step. When you can't leap forward, you can still lean forward. Momentum doesn't demand perfect conditions, it demands persistence in imperfect ones. Psychologists call this approach behavioral activation. It's a proven method for combating depression, fear, and helplessness. The principle is simple: action precedes emotion. You don't wait to feel better to act, you act first, and the feelings follow. Small wins restore agency. They remind you that you are not powerless, even when circumstances are beyond your control. And that restoration of agency is the first spark needed to reignite the abundance loop. Marcus's ankle eventually healed, but the greater victory was internal. He realized that setbacks weren't signs of weakness, they were opportunities to prove to himself that his identity wasn't tied to unbroken progress. His strength wasn't in never falling, it was in always getting back up, always finding a way to stay in motion, no matter how small the steps. The abundance loop, once set into motion, doesn't vanish with a single obstacle. It might slow down. It might require adjustments. But its power remains, ready to be reactivated by even the humblest of actions. Recovery isn't about dramatic comebacks. It's about stubborn faithfulness to small, meaningful choices. It's about refusing to let a bad day become a bad week become a lost month. Imagine setbacks not as dead ends but as detours, routes that might be longer, bumpier, but still capable of leading you forward. Every small win during a setback is like laying bricks across a broken bridge, one step closer to solid ground. And often the person you become in the process is stronger, wiser, and more resilient than the person you would have been without the fall. Marcus never ran his 10K on the original date. But a few months later, he crossed the finish line of another race, stronger than he would have been if everything had gone according to plan. He didn't just win the race, he won the battle against giving up. And that was a victory no setback could ever erase. In the next chapter, you'll explore how stacking these wins over time reshapes your identity into someone who naturally thrives in any circumstance. Chapter 11. The Abundance Identity. Becoming the person who wins daily. Before Claire discovered the abundance loop, she thought success was a series of isolated events, occasional peaks rising from a flat, unremarkable landscape. She believed winners were lucky or genetically wired differently, born with traits she lacked. What she didn't realize was that success wasn't about rare, extraordinary moments. It was about becoming a certain kind of person, a person who wins daily, not because they always feel like it, but because it's simply who they are. At first, Claire focused only on behavior. She built micro-actions into her days, a short walk here, a gratitude note there, 10 focused minutes on a daunting project. Each small win spun the wheel faster, building momentum she could feel. But something deeper was happening beneath the surface. With every action completed, her self-image shifted, inch by inch, from someone trying to change to someone who changes. The abundance identity was taking root. Identity is the hidden lever of lasting transformation. Behaviors are important, but they are fragile if they conflict with how you see yourself. If deep down you believe you are lazy, undisciplined, or unlucky, no amount of short-term success will stick. You will unconsciously sabotage yourself to stay consistent with your internal story. But when your actions align with a new, empowering identity, change becomes natural, almost inevitable. You no longer fight yourself. You reinforce yourself. Claire's breakthrough came when she stopped asking, "What should I do today?" and started asking, "What would someone like me do today?" Not the old Claire, the new one she was building with every small victory. Someone who values health would take a walk, even when tired. Someone who prioritizes connection would send that difficult but loving message. Someone who believes in growth would invest 10 minutes in a skill, instead of numbing out with distractions. Decision-making became easier because the questions shifted from effort to identity. Psychologists call this identity-based habits. Instead of focusing on outcomes, losing 20 pounds, writing a book, making more money, you focus on becoming the kind of person who naturally produces those outcomes. Results are no longer distant targets, they are natural byproducts of who you are becoming every day through small, deliberate choices. The beauty of the abundance identity is that it doesn't require perfection, it thrives on consistency, not flawlessness. Claire had bad days, missed workouts, forgot gratitude notes. But because her identity had shifted, Those lapses didn't define her. They were anomalies, not confirmations of failure. She simply returned to her small wins the next day, trusting the process, trusting herself. Building an abundance identity also changes how you weather challenges. When setbacks hit, you don't panic and abandon the loop, you anchor yourself in who you are. The question becomes, how does a resilient person respond? Instead of why does this always happen to me? Growth becomes less about heroics and more about returning, again and again, to the quiet daily wins that reinforce your foundation. Claire's transformation wasn't dramatic in the beginning. Friends didn't gasp overnight at her new life. But months later they started to notice something different, an ease, a steadiness, a lightness in the way she carried herself. She didn't seem to be chasing success anymore. She embodied it. It radiated from the inside out, born not from massive external changes but from 1,000 internal affirmations of who she had chosen to become. You don't need to become someone else to thrive. You need to become more of who you already are at your best, the version of you that believes, acts, and wins, even in small, private ways. The abundance loop spins faster when fueled by identity, not effort alone. Take care and be well.